Welcome to the Maverrik podcast, business growth tips and discussions to make you the expert in demand.
Hello, welcome to this episode of the Maverrik podcast. I am Lick2, and today I'm joined by Nadia Bubennikova, the head of agency at Buzzguru. Hi, Nadia, how's it going?
Yeah, hi, Luke. Thanks for having me.
Didn't realize it before the rest of the takes. I messed it up 3 times.
So well, you did eventually, so.
We got there. I'm there now. So you're the head of agency at Buzzguru. Do you just want to give us an introduction to what Buzzguru is and what you do at the company?
Yeah, sure. Buzzguru is a European influencer marketing agency. We provide full cycle influencer marketing campaigns on Twitch, on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. And basically the regions we cover are English-speaking Tier 1, Europe, Asia, Latin America, Arab countries, basically like the whole world. So I won't be just listing all the regions I know. You can just trust me on that.
So you've got a lot of niches everywhere throughout the world.
Yeah.
Because,
and
I was going to say, when you mentioned influencer, the phrase influencer, it kind of gains that idea of, oh, it's someone who is very popular in a sort of certain field. I'll do a really light question to start off with. What's the strangest niche influencer you work with?
Oh, the strangest. I think that was the agriculture.
Okay.
Citizens, yeah, that we were looking for. That was something because if we're talking about like gamers or some mainstream influencer categories, then the influencers are used to getting a lot of deals. They are used to getting like all the sponsorship offers and running them. But when we're talking about senior agricultural citizens, then that's going to be a problem because you still have to negotiate. You still have to try to get the payment to them, to use like PayPal or something, but that's not working as smoothly as it would with some mainstream types of influencers. So that was actually a blast, I can say that.
So you work with both agencies looking to work with influencers and the influencers themselves, like pairing them together and making sure they get, the most from that relationship. I feel like it's predominantly with products and services, and you work with the games industry as well. So how did that sort of develop and grow? Did you start off focusing on finding new influencers, or was you focused more on the analytics side of things? Because you also work with the metrics, don't you, to work out who, you see which one's the influencers and who to work with, who to pair. So did the analytics side come first, or was it the finding the agencies that work with influencers?
Honestly, the analytics is, I would say, 75% of the success, since we have our own analytical tool, as you probably know. This is a huge influencer intelligence platform. Sorry, one sec. That's a huge influencer intelligence platform that basically allows you to both find new influencers, to get all the relevant data on them, all their stats, all the metrics that you would be interested in when you're into influencer marketing, and also to analyze what other products and other brands do. So which influencers they choose, how they run their influencer campaigns, what regions are they strongest at, etc. So of course, I think even before the first campaign that we ever run in Buzzguru, the analytics has always come first, because without actually knowing what you're dealing with and what the product is, how the product is advertised on other platforms, or how it has been advertised with influencers already, and what their competitors do, there's no starting off. Well, of course, there will be a start, but it probably would be a rough one.
Yeah, if you was getting started with sourcing an influencer, I think what people are really afraid of is working with someone they've got a following, but it's not an engaged following. I feel like you need to use a lot more insights than it's not just how many followers you have, how many views does 1 or 2 posts have anymore. It's really down to how frequently do they post, when do they post, who do they post to, and there's a lot more that goes into it. So yes, I guess your platform really had to develop with finding out who these influencers want to work with you, and then you needed to track if they, are they who they say they are? I don't want to say it in that sort of way, but it is let's actually see who you are, what you're about, so you can have the right pairing, because that's important, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And it's actually a rookie's very common mistake, looking at the number of followers instead of the number of views. For example, if we're talking about YouTube videos, or the number of likes if we're talking about Instagram or TikTok. So of course, to really source the right influencers that will bring some kind of performance to your product that you will be satisfied with, you have to analyze more than just the number of followers or even the number of posts and like the frequency of those postings. You really have to look into the engagement rate to see how active the audience actually is with this influencer's post. So you have to really understand whether the audience is interested in what this influencer has to say and what he has to recommend before making a deal with him. Or it's just, like some random YouTube content that you can just turn on your TV and go, I don't know, cook a dinner, for example. Because for these types of contents, the engagement is usually very low, and therefore the performance of an ad would be as well.
So do you get people approach you saying, hey, I want to work with this person, and then just throw a name out there? Do you then have to like sort of go, okay, let's see if we can get in touch, or do we work with them? How does that work? When people approach you, is the most frequently asked question, oh, I want to be featured by X? Is that what happens often?
Honestly, I would say that this is what happens often with Chinese clients for some reason, because they really know what they want. They do all the planning themselves, basically, and they just come to you with a list of influencers, and they're like, here's, I don't know, 150 names. We need all of them. Just go ahead, good luck, and get them all on board. Yeah, but actually the majority of the brands that we work with, they trust our expertise and they trust our experience. So if we have a different set of minds on a specific strategy or on a specific campaign, then they are 100% willing to go with what we have to offer.
So, I mean, does it have much effect on it with the different approach? I guess you'll work with them anyway to say, okay, maybe this isn't the full list you need. There are some others in your niche which you could go for. Is it predominantly products and services that you go into, or I don't know how it would work on a B2B platform, because obviously we're quite prevalent on LinkedIn, Maverrik are. So in terms of a B2B platform, it would kind of be more recommendations, but that's what influencer marketing really is. It's kind of getting, it's like a huge endorsement / case study from someone who has a huge following, and then you kind of leveraging that to get your message out there, and then making sure they align. How does transparency work in the scenarios? Because you do have to, if you're an influencer, if you're posting content out there and someone sponsors your content, how does that need to be conveyed?
Actually, that depends very much on the region, because for the United States and for the creators from the United States, it's much more strict, because they have to disclose that their certain video has a sponsored content, and this specific product is an ad. So you can very often see the hashtag ad or hashtag sponsored with them. It's not because they just like to disclose it, but that's because they have to. But if we're talking about the majority of the European countries, or if we're talking about tier 2 or tier 3 regions, the influencers don't have to follow the strict guidelines. So they can just make a video, and they cannot disclose that this specific content is actually sponsored. So that pretty much depends, but I would say that the majority of the influencers prefer to not disclose that something is sponsored, if they can, of course.
I feel most audiences they automatically assume that something's going to be sponsored. If you watch any movie or TV show and you see a perfectly kind of Coke, just in shot, they're like, that's a sponsor. It might not even be a sponsor. I don't think the sponsor on the Game of Thrones episode was legit for Starbucks, but it's one of those things where people will just automatically assume, oh, you're definitely a sponsor for this. But it's more of the case of you're seeing this for the first time. I feel like a lot of people get all of their new services, new products, and their new games from watching their favorite streamer play it, from watching, an influencer online using the product. And even in the space, I mentioned B2B earlier, even on the space where this happens quite frequently. If I said I was using this tool to get my website to be promoted, if I had a huge following behind myself and people saw me as successful, they'd be like, well, I want to use that as well. I want to be that person who uses that tool. So in terms of finding the right fit, then, is that quite a long process?
That depends on what tools you have, because if we're talking about a newbie who has never done influencer marketing, even if the brand is big, but they have no experience, they have no actual knowledge of what exactly they need and what exactly they want, then yeah, that's going to be a very long process, because without hiring a specialist who has at least some experience in influencer marketing, that's going to be a very tough road. Without having some specific tools and having the right tools, the right platforms that will allow you to search for influencers easily and more quickly, yes, that's once again going to be a very tough road. But if you have some experience in that field, or you have some contacts, some agencies, or at least some platforms that will help you out, then that can be shortened to 1 week.
Yeah, it's quite when you work with an influencer, you're kind of putting your brand on them as well. So it's kind of like a merger, but it's kind of a way where you've put your faith in them to deliver your message, and then they have put their faith in you to be a provider for a good service. Because there's multiple times where there's a lot probably a negotiation between if it's a long existing relationship where things can get. Some things have said, some political opinions might have been said, and then you kind of have that balance between, okay, we need to mediate between what is right and wrong for that brand, because we probably have to send out quite a few, yeses and nos, and that's kind of a mediation which you probably do. Can that be tricky to navigate?
Oh yeah, we've actually had several cases with big gaming companies that actually never allow any kind of adult language or explicit language in their videos. And in one of the campaigns, that was somehow missed. So the client never communicated it to us, and they approved an influencer who is very active and very creative in his explicit language, let's say. And we had a whole dedicated video for 25 to 30 minutes of this influencer playing the game, covering it. The feedback on the game was great, and the video was approved by the client and was, of course, posted by the influencer. And then the client realizes that there actually is a lot of explicit language. So we have to take the video down, and we have to communicate it to the influencer that, even though the video was approved, it turns out that we actually need to censor everything down. And it was like 20% of what he was saying in the video. So we really had some trouble with communicating it to the influencer, because, of course, he thinks that he did his job well, and on the paper, that really is what happened. But we had to censor everything. We had to cut some pieces, and we agreed with the influencer that he will censor everything and re-upload the video. So yeah, it can be really tricky.
It would go from a huge live stream to a YouTube video to a TikTok in a matter of just how you've needed to trim that down. Like, oh no, that goes down a little bit more. So you'd have to change the platform as you go down.
Screenshots of brand events.
Do you match platform to company as well? That's a good just point of thought of. So is it always, okay, this is the kind of platform that you'd want to be working on with first, or do you pick the influencer and then there's platform-wide campaigns? Because obviously I think a lot of creators now are on multiple platforms. Like we're on YouTube now. This podcast also go out on all the podcast sites, probably Spotify, iTunes, and we also condense this down to our shorts as well to promote this podcast. So this will be on every channel itself. So in terms of the influencer themselves, are there packages for the entire platforms, or do you try and specifically say, okay, this will be a YouTube campaign or this will be a TikTok campaign?
That actually depends very much on the product and on the specific campaign, because initially what we do is, of course, we analyze the product, we test it out with our team, we try to get involved as much as we can into the product, into its mechanics. And then what we do next is we actually analyze all the influencer activations that this product's competitors have. So we try to find what influencers their competitors launch, what kind of videos they do. And once we have the full picture, once we have the full context of what this specific product was doing and what its competitors are doing currently, we can define our strategy. And we can decide on what platform to use, which regions we should focus on, depending on how big is the coverage of the competitors, for example. And then once we have the platform, we just go down to some content types, we go to the target audience, we go to the creative ideas, and et cetera, et cetera. So it really depends, but usually we go from the platform to the influencers. If we really want to build something long-term, I would say, and to keep the retention of new users to the product, then of course, just having one single integration or one single dedicated video is not enough, because you have to really combine it with a dedicated video going first. Then you usually follow it with some IG stories or a TikTok or another integration or a dedicated video on YouTube. So it depends on what goals we have and how much traffic is actually expected from us by the client.
Yeah, you'd have multiple touch points for a certain product. If it's a more expensive product, you need a lot more interactions between, you know, the first time seeing it, oh, that's great. And then you have to have those multiple actions of seeing it, knowing what it's about. And then as soon as you kind of know what it's all about, then you start to actually consider, you know, the purchase stage or you know, getting into the service kind of stage. You mentioned competitor analysis as well. This is going to be quite a loaded question. Have you ever, what's the word? Have you ever pitted two influencers against each other who you know would, because obviously it's, you know, when it comes to creative spaces, it can be a lot of like, I won't say like beef or drama, but you can have some who would want to prefer to work with another in a competitive space, and you can always tell that they'd always go with each other's services. Is there a way that you kind of avoid that, in a sense, where you'd avoid going with someone you know would be the direct competitor of another influencer? Or do you keep it separate?
I was not talking about the competitor analysis among influencers, but between brands.
Oh, so, right, sorry.
Yeah, but no, honestly, we never had such kind of drama, some influencer drama going on, and I'm very thankful to the universe for that, because that's not something to be very interested in when you're working in influencer marketing. But yeah, we're blessed that we didn't have to deal with it, honestly.
I can imagine, because it'd have to be, when it comes to the values and the transparency, you'd have to keep track of pretty much all the other feeds and seeing what people are talking about. Because with the analytics, I guess it's also, you're talking about the spaces, and when you're in a creative field, sometimes you pivot into new places. Maybe audiences change. Maybe there's a lot of drop off. So keeping on board of that is probably quite a tough thing. Do you have teams dedicated to filling out those fields, or do you rely on kind of the systems you built in place to keep track of that?
We have a set of teams, each responsible for a specific vertical, each responsible for a specific region, and for some specific products as well, of course. So combining it with the info that we get from our platform and from our inner departments is actually what keeps everything on flow, and what actually allows us to keep track of everything, to keep track of all the changes, because influencer marketing is probably the number one field of marketing that is due to like some constant changes, because of course every marketing field is and everything changes. But if we're talking about influencer marketing, we're talking about the trendsetters, the people who actually create those trends. So we have to keep track of everything and to keep track of every little, like, smallest change that you can think of. Yeah.
That's great. So final question, or I'll wrap up. What is your expert advice for getting into influencer marketing then? Just a soft lowball.
Yeah, first of all, any company that is thinking about influencer marketing should really, first of all, decide what exactly they want to get from it. Is it a user acquisition campaign? Is it a brand awareness campaign? Is it something very ROI and performance strict wise? And then once you have all of the goals and all of your expectations in check, then you should actually try to see and check if that's actually real, if that's realistic, and if that actually can be done. Because sometimes if the strategy and the initial plan is poorly developed, then the whole strategy and the whole campaign will just go down. So those first like milestones that are crucial for building performing strategy and performing campaign are actually what brings a campaign either to the top or just to the very bottom of it. So analyze, decide, double check, triple check, and then find a reliable partner or a reliable platform that you can really use to get the most of it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Nadia, for joining us on the Maverrik podcast. I'll just do a quick wrap up. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to us, like and comment on all of your bits you find really interesting. And we will see you next time for our next podcast. Thank you again, Nadia.
Yeah, thank you too for having me. That was fun.
And we'll see you next time.